Welcome everybody. We're here at Meyerland Minyan and we're going to share a very interesting Torah thought about the concept of what's called Ein Mashgichin Babat Kol. When it comes to Torah ideas, we don't look and feel and believe in a heavenly voice proclaiming something to us, as we'll see in the story that we're going to quote from the Talmud, but we don't listen to a heavenly voice coming out and saying X should be the halakha, X is the way the Jewish people should act. We still don't believe in that, but rather we believe in what the sages will tell us, even against what it says in heaven. And this is a very controversial topic, a very interesting topic, because as we know it, God, the Torah, heaven, that's the most important thing, and that's the bottom line in any regard. But we're going to see in this interesting piece of Talmud where it actually says something very different. So the story goes, there was a dispute in the Talmud, it's in Bava Metzia on page 59, a dispute between a man by the name of Rabbi Eliezer, who's a great Torah scholar in the Talmud, and he was against many sages in regards to the final verdict to a specific oven that was under discussion. It's not relevant to the details of what was going on, but Rabbi Eliezer said, I say that this oven is totally fine, you can use it for kosher cooking. The sages came along and said, no, Rabbi Eliezer, you cannot use this oven for kosher cooking. This is completely considered impure according to the Torah, and this oven has to be smashed because it was an earthenware vessel which can never be just put into a mikvah, which is the general ritual bath that can make something kosher. This has to be destroyed. And they had a very large dispute. And here's where the story gets very interesting. Rabbi Eliezer says, you know what, sages? You're all arguing with me? I'm going to prove to you that I'm right. And they said, okay, great. You're one person, we're 25 people against you, we're the majority, we're going to rule like us, but try to see what you can prove to us. Knock yourself out, as they say in New York, right? So Rabbi Eliezer says, everybody look out the window, there's a carob tree all the way down the road. They look down, they see the carob tree, and Rabbi Eliezer says, that carob tree is going to prove to you that in this dispute about the oven, I'm correct. So everybody said, wow, okay, that's like, I don't know how you're proving from a carob tree, but let's see what happens. That second, the carob tree uprooted itself, recorded in the Talmud, flew 400 feet, and landed right outside the study hall that they were all sitting in. Landed outside the torch center of yesteryear. And everybody was amazed. A miracle was performed in front of their eyes. But they all turned to Rabbi Eliezer and they said, it's really amazing what you did, but we don't prove halakha, we don't listen to a carob tree. A carob tree is not going to tell me how I'm supposed to act. We are a majority of sages. We think the halakha over here is that this is impure, this oven cannot be used. We can't allow for you to be considered correct in the halakha over here, and people use an oven for kosher cooking when we feel that it's impure. So they continue on in the conversations, and Rabbi Eliezer says, you know what? I have another proof to bring to you. So they said, okay, we're happy to hear your proofs. They're very fair. Rabbis are nice, good people, being very fair, letting everybody put down their claims. And he says, everybody look outside, you see there's a pond. And that pond of water is going to prove to you that I'm correct. They said, okay, let's see. Now they already have an idea of what he's going to do, right? They know he's going to perform a miracle with the water, but how's that going to tell them that all of a sudden he's correct? So they all look outside, Rabbi Eliezer snaps, and the water exits the body and runs down the street. So they see another miracle in front of their eyes, this big, huge pond of water. The second he said it's going to create a proof for him and show that he's correct, exits, body of water, and just starts running down the street. They turned to him and said, very nice, it's very impressive, and wow, you have a lot of spiritual powers, obviously. We don't prove things from bodies of water. And let's pay attention, because we're going to ask a few questions on the story, that the specific words, the specific verbiage that they use is we don't prove from a carob or from a body of water. They didn't say we don't prove from miracles. They specifically focused on the fact, and we'll explain in great detail why, they said those specific things. They focus on the specific item at hand that performed the miracle. So they continue on talking, and he says, a few minutes later, I have another proof to bring to you, and now they're completely clear that it's going to be some kind of miracle. What's this proof that he's going to bring? And he says, everybody look up at the walls of the study hall. This study hall that we're sitting in, the walls all around us, they're going to prove that I'm correct. So they said, okay, that's like interesting, how the walls of the study hall, and that's even more interesting because they're all sitting in the study hall, they're all great sages as well. Like, how's the study hall going to start siding with Rabbi Eliezer? They waited, and that second that he said it, the walls of the entire Bet Midrash, this entire study hall, started tilting down, and all four walls surrounding the building were like hanging halfway in mid-air, seemingly about to fall, but they were just hanging there. And he looked at them and he said, look, like I brought you a carob tree, I brought you the water, I brought you the walls of the study hall itself. If you want to tell me that carob and water doesn't mean anything, but a study hall is siding with me, like, what's that showing you? That I have some serious connection with the study hall. You're still not going to listen to me? And they said, no, we're so sorry, we don't have proofs in halakha that come from the study hall. So he says, okay. Rabbi Eliezer sits down and he thinks, and he tells himself, I really have to find something that's a much larger proof than just an ordinary miracle, because they're not listening and buying to any of the amazing miracles that I'm performing. So he turns up to heaven and he tells them, and he turns up to heaven at the same time, he says, from heaven, min hashamayim yochichu, which translates into English, the heavens itself, they're going to prove to you that I'm right. So now everybody's already like on the edge of their seat, because if heaven's going to start proving it to the group of sages there, then they have to tie their hands behind their back and side with him. Even though there's a majority of sages that are disagreeing with him, but heaven's heaven, right? We don't mess with heaven, as they say, right? You know, the famous saying is we don't mess with Texas. So in Judaism we say we don't mess with heaven, right? Heaven's heaven. So everybody turns up, and again that second, a heavenly voice, which is called in the Jewish way of talking a bat kol, a voice screaming out of heaven, says that the halacha is like Rabbi Eliezer in all places. He's the greatest Torah scholar. Halacha is with him. So now Rabbi Eliezer, fixes his tie, sits up, and he tells himself, okay, this is over, I got this. And he's also, mind you, trying to help the Jewish people. And halacha in general, this will be a little bit of, to digress for a second, but the rabbis always try to be able to say that something is pure rather than impure, something's kosher rather than not kosher, or something's permissible rather than not permissible. And there's a concept in Torah called koach dehetera adif. The strength, the power of somebody saying that something's permissible is stronger than a rabbi being able to say that you're not allowed to do that. If you come, this obviously has to be taken with a lot of subjectivity, but in general, if a person comes to a rabbi with a question, and that question isn't clear in the code of Jewish law as to whether it's permitted or not permitted, the Talmud tells us that a greater rabbi is one who knows all the halacha and is able to help the person and tell the person that I know so many different areas of this halacha, and this would actually be permissible. Because the strength and the power of a rabbi being able to say that's permissible, that shows A, that he's a greater rabbi and a greater scholar because he knows enough and has big enough shoulders to be able to say that the halacha is permissible. But B, and I think more importantly, is that we don't, the purpose of halachot and Judaism is not to just pigeonhole people and push them into a corner and say you can't do this, you can't do that. It's a bunch of no-nos. It's a beautiful, as one very famous rabbi explained in a shiur that I listened to many years ago, it's a tapestry of order. The code of Jewish law is not laws. If you look at it from a bird's eye view, you understand it on a deeper level, and you understand the purpose of Judaism, the purpose of halachot, the purpose of laws, then it's what we call a tapestry of order. And a tapestry of order is not to create problems for a person and say you can't do this, you can't do that. So we digress for a second, but just to bring out that point that Rabbi Eliezer was trying to come over here and say, no, this oven is permissible. And the Jewish people in the town that they were discussing it, the town of discussion for this oven, it's permissible and they can use it. They don't have to throw it out, they don't have to spend more money now to buy a new oven. He was actually trying to really help them, and possibly, as my own interpretation, why he was fighting so strongly with the whole group of sages on a seemingly simple matter is because the monetary loss of a Jew and the monetary loss of any person, if we can avoid that, we try to really avoid that, and that's what Eliezer was trying to do. So heaven proved it, getting back to our story, and everybody's like okay, our hands are tied, we have to listen. Until one sage who was on the other side of Rabbi Eliezer, part of the group of sages that disagreed with him, said, we do not, and this is what we started off explaining the controversial topic, we do not listen to heavenly voices. Now, I don't know about all of you, but for me, if it's just going to come out of a rabbi's mouth and one of the greatest sages of all time, Rabbi Yoshua, we don't listen to heavenly voices, I would be very taken aback. I'd be very skeptical. I'd be very confused because, we have obviously sages, and it's great that we have sages and rabbis and torch rabbis and all other kinds of rabbis teaching us Torah down here on earth, but at the end of the day, we know that heaven is where it all comes from. Heaven is where it all starts from. So this is a very, very interesting piece of Talmud that needs a lot of explanation, and as one might actually think, there is many, many commentaries talking about what exactly is going on in this piece of Talmud, and specifically explaining that last line of how we just don't listen to heavenly voices. When Rabbi Yeshua says we don't listen to heavenly voices, he actually quotes a verse from the Torah, which this is already going to be a little bit of an insight into what's happening over here. He's not just simply saying, I decided as a rabbi down here on earth that we don't listen anymore to what comes out of heaven. He's saying that the Torah says, and the verse says in the Torah, in Deuteronomy, Torah lo bashamayim hi. The Torah, the Holy Torah, is not in heaven anymore. So there's a verse in the Torah that says that. We have to understand what it means. But clearly Rabbi Yeshua is indicating to us over here that even though a heavenly voice came out, heavenly voices don't come from nowhere, right? They must have come from Hashem, but Hashem himself told us in the Torah that Torah is not in heaven anymore. The Torah is not in heaven anymore, the Torah is now down here. So let's analyze and try to understand a little bit of what's happening in this story, as well as the main point which we all want to understand, at least for me, I want to understand what's the bottom line over here as how we don't listen to heavenly voices. Yes, there's a verse in the Torah that says Torah is not in heaven anymore, but I would, on my own accord, think that if I have on one side of the equation a verse telling me Torah is not in heaven, on the other side a heavenly voice screaming down to me, the halacha is that this oven is okay, this oven is not okay, I'm sorry, because that's what the sages are saying, then I would assume that I would side with the heavenly voice. So let's understand this. So the Vilna Gaon, his name was Rabbi Kramer, lived in the 1600s, was one of the greatest Torah scholars that have ever lived in the past few hundred centuries. He's known by his acronym as the Gra. Gimel Resh Aleph, which stands for Gaon, the genius, Rabbi Eliyahu. His name was Rabbi Kramer from Vilna. But he's known to the regular population now, the way they talk about him is the Gra. So the Gra brings down this whole piece of Talmud, and then he starts asking questions. One of the questions is one of the questions we posed earlier, and the question is, how is it that we can understand why the sages were responding to him and saying, we don't prove from a carrot, we don't prove from the walls of a Bet Midrash, we don't prove from water. Why are they focusing on those specific little, small, minute details? Why don't they just tell him, we don't listen to miracles. You could bring a miracle, but that's not going to prove anything to me. That's question number one. Question number two is, after the first miracle, he picked up a carob tree and had it jump 250 feet. Why is he performing more miracles? They're obviously not listening to his miracles. You can't get a bigger miracle than that, right? So why is he continuing to perform miracles? Question number two. And okay, so we'll deal with those questions for now, and we're going to see an amazing insight that the Vilna Gaon tells us over here, which is going to lead us also to the understanding at the end of what we meant by ein mashgichin bebat kol. We don't listen to heavenly voices. So let's start analyzing this. The Vilna Gaon tells us that there are three character traits that a person needs to be able to acquire Torah in its fullest form. Now obviously we have to, before we talk about this, we have to preface by saying, with a disclaimer, that there are many people involved in Torah, growing in Torah, that don't exemplify these three character traits which we're going to mention in the most perfect way. What he means is, for a person to be the embodiment of Torah, the quintessential Torah scholar, Torah person, that person needs to have three specific character traits in the greatest way. Now what are those three character traits? The first one is what he calls histapkut. Histapkut means that a person is, for argument's sake, we can call it a minimalist. That he's okay with having less in his life. He's okay with living on small amounts of food. He's okay with living in a smaller home. He doesn't need to be driving a Rolls Royce or a Bentley or a McLaren. He's okay with whatever God gives him. He's really happy with that. The second one is putting in a lot of effort into his Torah learning. If a person doesn't put in effort, shkeda is the Hebrew term, he's not going to be able to be the perfect, most amazing, quintessential Torah embodiment of what a Torah personality should be. And the third one is anava, which is humbleness. If a person is not humble, a person has a haughty way about him, then he's not going to be the person which is going to exemplify what the Torah wanted from a true Torah scholar. And the Vilna Gaon explains that what was happening in this whole story was missed until you get to the Vilna Gaon to understand. Rabbi Eliezer wasn't just performing miracles and showing them that, hey, I can perform miracles, so therefore, now side with me in the halakha. Because that really doesn't make sense. If you could perform a miracle, the chances are that Rabbi Yeshua and the other 20 sages can perform even more miracles. So why would that miracle alone show me that we should listen to you? What was happening was, he was trying to show them that I have all these three character traits of humbleness, putting in a lot of effort into my Torah learning, and being a person that's mistapik bamuid, that lives with a little. So how did he show him these three things from these three miracles? So the Vilna Gaon explains very, very beautifully that we find in the Talmud that Torah is compared to water. And the reason why Torah is compared to water is because the Talmud says that ma mayim, just like water goes from a high place to a low place, you just put it on top of a mountain, it'll start trickling down, so too Torah is only going to be fulfilled in its fullest sense again by a person that's humble. And if a person doesn't make himself lower and he thinks himself higher and he's not like water which goes the opposite way, then he won't get Torah. So that's how we see that Torah is compared to water, and specifically because water is what signifies to us humbleness. So what Rabbi Eliezer was showing them with the body of water was that, everybody look, this body of water is going to turn itself upside down, exit the body of water, and just jump down the street. And the reason why the water is doing that, he didn't do this with sand, he didn't do this with plants, he did it with water. And the reason for that is because he was showing them that I have this character trait of anava, I have this character trait of humbleness, and I'm a humble person, and we know that being a humble person is what's necessary to be able to become the quintessential Torah scholar. So I have humbleness, and I'm the quintessential Torah scholar because of that, therefore the halakha should be like me. They turned to him in response and said, we don't prove from water. What did they mean? That just having a humble character trait, that's not enough. Because we know, as the Vilna Gaon explained to us, and these scholars all understood this, you need to be humble, you need to have a lot of effort in your Torah learning, and you need to be able to be a minimalist, to live with less. So all you prove to me is 33.3 1/3 of the puzzle, right? There's still 2/3 that you need to show me to be able to have me realize that now you're really that person who halakha should be like you because you're the greatest Torah scholar. So he said, okay, the water's not going to be enough, I'm going to prove to you from a carob tree. What does a carob tree have to do with any of these ideas? So the Vilna Gaon explains that the Talmud tells us that Rabbi Chanina was a big Torah scholar. Hashem said about him in the Talmud, Rabbi Chanina beni, my son Chanina, dailo bekav charuvim me'erev Shabbat u'erev Shabbat. It was sufficient for him to eat one carob, which is like some kind of buxer, some kind of small item from a tree. He was able to live on that, to be sustained on that from week to week. And the Torah over there is showing us that the carob is what signifies a person who's able to live as a minimalist. So what was happening now, we understand in the story, what Rabbi Eliezer was doing was telling them, look, the carob tree is jumping for me because I'm a minimalist as well. I live histaput. I live with a much lesser level of needing gashmiut and materialistic things. And therefore, the halakha should be like me as well, because I'm exemplifying all these character traits which are necessary for a person to be a true Torah scholar. So they said, that's also very nice, but we're still not going to prove from a carob. Why not? Because that's only 2/3 of the puzzle. You showed us now that you're a person who is a minimalist. You showed us now, the Torah is clearly showing us through these miracles that you're a humble person. What about the effort? How do I know that you're this person? As the Vilna Gaon tells us, you need to have a lot of effort and toil into Torah to be able to be the quintessential Torah scholar. So he says, okay, I'm going to show you guys that I also have this very serious effort. What does the Talmud say? The Talmud. Okay. So the Talmud tells us that the way we see if a person puts in a lot of effort into his Torah is simply by seeing where is he in the mornings and where is he at nights. If we see early in the morning he gets up and he's in the study hall and he's in the Bet Knesset and he's praying and he's learning Torah, and then at night we go back to the Torah study hall and we see that he's there again studying, so we now know that that person who's sitting in the Bet Midrash, in the study hall, he's obviously the person who's exerting much effort into becoming a great Torah scholar. So how did Rabbi Eliezer prove to them that he has all this effort and he really is involved in exerting himself for Torah? By telling them that the walls of the Bet Midrash, they're going to prove it. Because the walls of the Bet Midrash are the best place to start as a testimony to a person who is sitting in the Bet Midrash studying and exerting effort in his Torah learning. And right away, as we said in the story, the walls of the Bet Midrash started collapsing. They performed the miracle for Rabbi Eliezer. So now Rabbi Eliezer turns to them and says, look, I have all three qualities that are necessary for a person to exemplify Torah and halacha should be like me. What were those three things? He has the humble character trait way about himself, he's a minimalist, and he has all the effort, because these three things, as culled from different sources all over the Talmud, the Vilna Gaon now showed us, are teaching all these sages, Rabbi Eliezer showing them, look, I have all these character traits, and therefore I'm the 100% perfect person who embodies Torah and embodies the ability to adjudicate Torah law, and therefore the law should be like me. And they turned to him and they said that that's still not enough. And it's unclear as to why that's still not enough, but I would venture to say that even though he proved to them all those three things, they are 20 Torah sages on the other side, and who's to say that Rabbi Eliezer might have thought that once he showed them that he's the perfect quintessential Torah scholar to be, they also can be. And not only can they also be, there's 20 of them. So if he's still one person, and there's 20 of them, and there's a Torah verse which says that Achrei Rabim Lahatot, we always go after majority. So there are a majority of 20 people, he's one person, so it's very nice and it's beautiful. All these miracles are performed to you, but that never negated their credibility. That never said that they're not these people who can prove to us, who just are the most humble, minimalist, effort-driven kind of people. So they said that that's still not going to be enough. So now Rabbi Eliezer realized any more miracles is not going to help me, because the purpose of the miracles was just to show them that I embody the perfect balance of a Torah scholar, and that didn't work for them, and he probably understood it's because they're all on that level as well, and it's 20 against 1 at this point. So he turned to heaven, because that was his last resort. He said, heaven, please help me, because again, I want to help the Jewish people, I want to show the Jewish people that this is actually mutar and permissible, and this oven is pure. And heaven screamed out with a heavenly voice, Torah is like, the halacha is like you. So now, how do we deal with the fact that a heavenly voice is coming out of heaven and telling us halacha is like you? So the Vilna Gaon brings an amazing midrash, which is going to explain in a very perfect way what transpired at the end of the story. The midrash records that pre-creation, when God was deciding and discussing, so to speak, the creation of the world with the different entities in the world, he spoke to kindness and asked the entity of kindness how he feels about creating the world. He spoke to emet, which is truth, and asked him how he feels about creating the world. He spoke to sheker, to falsehood, and said, how do you feel about creating the world? It's a very mystical concept of how God spoke to these entities pre-creation, but the midrash records this as this is what took place. And God asked Emet, should I create the world? Truth. He spoke to the midah, the character trait of truth. Should I create the world? And he said no. Truth said, God, I'd rather you not create the world. For me it would be better not. Why? Because there's so much falsehood going on in the world and will go on in the world that I don't have a place in that. And I'd rather the world not be created and that everything should stay in its pristine state of Emet. Chesed, which is kindness, obviously said, yes, create the world, because it's beneficial for mankind to be created, to have a creator, and to go through life as a created being, serving God, which ultimately benefits the person themselves. So Chesed said, kindness said, create the world. So God didn't know what to do, because he had Chesed telling him, yes, create the world, Emet telling him to create the world, How do I go about deciding which one I should do? So the Midrash quotes a pasuk in Tehillim which says, "Hishlich emet arza." God took emet and he threw it to the ground. And that's basically where the Midrash ends. God threw emet to the ground, and the story ends there. So the Vilna Gaon explains what was happening over here. What was going on? Chesed and emet were fighting, and emet was thrown to the ground, and then all of a sudden everything was okay. So the Vilna Gaon explains in a very amazing way that what God was appeasing emet with is the following. Emet's problem was that truth is so hard to be discerned between the multitude of claims and reasonings and thoughts, and nowadays you sure can understand that media outlets telling us this, media outlets telling us this lawyer saying that this person is 100% guilty and should be killed at the stake, and another lawyer telling us this person is 100% innocent, they should become the president of the United States in 4 years. How do you understand all this? And Emet was telling God that there's so much complication, there's so much thickness that needs to be cut through to get to Emet, it's just going to be impossible. And we can understand this also from a judicial standpoint, right? A person has a court case, they go to their local court in their district, and then they want to appeal. So they go to a higher court, then they go to a state court, then they go to the federal court, then they can go to the Supreme Court, right? There's so many levels of and it's the same story over and over again. There's some people that spend years and years in court trying to get to the bottom line, which hopefully at the end of the day is going to be the truth. Because we're not even sure that when the Supreme Court rules in a majority against somebody and says he's innocent, he's guilty, whatever, not against any kind of ruling, at that point we're not even sure that it's emet. We're not even sure that it's truth. And it's very interesting. So says the Vilna Gaon, says the Gra, that Emet told God it's way too complicated to bring truth out in the world. And if it's so hard to bring truth out in the world, better not create the world. So what did God do? God told Emet, I'm going to throw you to the ground. What did he mean, I'm going to throw you to the ground? I'm going to punish you, I'm going to step on you? Didn't mean any of that. Says the Vilna Gaon, an amazing idea. What God meant was that when I create the Torah, when I give the Torah, and when I send the Torah down, so by the Sinaitic revelation where we got the Torah, from that point on, Emet, the definition of Emet, what truth is going to be, is what the sages say. If there's ever going to be a dispute on any level with anything that it's involved, whatever the court case might be, the great Torah sages of the generation are going to be the ones to decide the bottom line and the verdict in this case. So whether it's an oven deciding if it's pure or impure, whether it's the necessity to possibly take a life because of capital punishment of a person, whether it's just discussing whether someone owes someone money or not, whatever it's going to be, the decision is going to rest and lie in the hands of the great rabbis, the way the Vilna Gaon says it, the Sarei HaTorah, the people, the princes of Torah in the generation, the greatest rabbis, who we all know who those people are. And they're going to have emet, and God says, pre-creation, that what they say, that's emet. Because Emet didn't want the world to be created because it was so complicated to get to the truth. So God said, I have an idea. Let's just create a situation where the definition of Emet will be whatever the Torah sages say. So if there's a dispute between two people and the Torah sages come out and say it's pure, and majority rules that it's pure, it's game over. There's nothing to talk about anymore, because pre-creation it was already destined to be that once the world's created and the Torah is given, whatever the rabbis say, that takes precedent even over God coming out with a heavenly voice. Because we redefined emet to be whatever our Torah sages and the Torah scholars of our generation tell us. So now going back to the story with this powerful insight from the Vilna Gaon, we can understand what was Rabbi Yeshua telling Rabbi Eliezer? We don't listen to heavenly voices anymore. The Torah tells us a verse of it's not in heaven. The answer is yes. The Torah itself and the Midrash, I left this piece out, the Midrash says that the verse of Torah lo b'shamayim hi, the original verse which Rabbi Yeshua quoted and said it's not in heaven anymore, to bring out his point of ein mashkichin bebat kol, we don't listen to heavenly voices, that originated from this verse in the Torah. This verse in the Torah, says the Vilna Gaon within this Midrash, is the place where we see this idea that Torah is actually not in heaven anymore. The emet exists in Torah, and the Torah is not in heaven, it's with us. The rabbis of the generation, the disseminators of Torah, the people that are responsible and have the broad shoulders to what we call paskin, to give over the ruling of Torah. Torah lies with them to the point where even God himself might come out and say it should be X or it should be Y, but it doesn't make a difference because God already told us pre-creation that truth lies with the way that the Torah scholars are going to say the end result should be. And just to try to understand, because it's still possible for someone to be bothered by the concept of, at the end of the day, and after all these beautiful ideas, God did tell us that the halakha should be like Rabbi Eliezer. So if that question still bothers somebody, one of the medieval scholars named Tosfot, who lived around 1200 years ago, comments on this piece of Gemara, and he said that it's very possible that the only reason why the heavenly voice came out is in regards to honoring Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer was such a great Torah scholar, like we've just been discussing for a long time. If he was able to turn up to heaven and say, please show some kind of proof that the halakha should be like me, heaven, so to speak, acquiesced to his request out of honor for him. Right? When, as we say in Torah, lahavdil elef alfei havdalot, we try to separate between talking about God and talking about a human being, a human president. But lahavdil, if we would talk about a president, if he sends in a request to somebody and asks for something, the person might not necessarily agree to what the president asked of him, but they're going to honor that request because he's the president of the United States of America, and he's one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful person in the world as a human being today. So, lahavdil, to separate that from talking about God, but when we talk about God, and we talk about great Torah scholars, Rabbi Eliezer, who was the greatest Torah scholar of the time, turned to heaven and said, please show some proof to these sages that I'm correct. Out of honor to him, they sent out a heavenly voice. But it wasn't because God really believed that the halakha should be like him. It was just out of deference in respect, paying respect to Rabbi Eliezer. Thank everybody very much for listening. Have a wonderful Shabbat.